Hi there. Welcome to Paying IT Forward, where we have nuanced conversations about the IT industry from people actually living it. I'm your host, Obi, and for our second episode, I had the opportunity to speak to Karen Elliott. She's a senior lecturer and an associate professor at Newcastle University, and she's who you would refer to as a pracademic. And that basically comes from all the relevant work she's doing across industry and academia. She's heavily involved in the fintech space and in emerging technology as well, from blockchain to artificial intelligence. For example, she's doing some great work looking at the bias within algorithms, and how that could be brought about by an undiverse team working on a solution that would be applied to a diverse user base. So there's loads of fun stuff we got into there, and something I really love about her work is her ability to focus on people, and look underneath the surface when looking at problems and posing them in many cases as the complex problems that they are. We go into what it really means to be agile and why agile is probably the better approach based on our human nature to always evolve and change. So there was loads of fun stuff there. And finally, we covered the realities of being an academic, or sorry, rather a pracademic. It's not all fun and games. You do have to write the papers, you do have to, pay your dues. And she gives a very candid opinion on that and highlights the realities of what that involves. And that would be relevant to anyone who's probably interested in going into academia and doesn't know how to go about it, or wants to partner with academia for certain projects that might be beneficial. Something that was very, very nice that I really enjoyed was the role that academia could play in an advisory capacity to industry, which today is led by commercial incentives, and highlighting how that can be positive and negative, or negative, and where we could find a balance. So I think it was a great listen. I really hope you enjoy it. Don't forget to like, comment, and share so you can pay IT forward. See you on the next one. See you in there. Hi, Karen. How's it going?
Good, thanks. How are you? There's a bit of sunshine today.
Yeah, it's good weather today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been raining. I think it's been raining in the past couple of days, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a bit awful.
Yeah.
Good weather for tennis, hopefully, tonight. So.
Oh, yeah. Nice. How long have you been playing tennis for?
About 6 years now.
Wow.
So,
Are you into any other sports?
horse riding, cycling, weights. So quite a lot. We used to do triathlons, so it kind of stems from there.
Yeah. All around though, isn't it?
Yeah, horse riding's the favorite though. Riding horses. So.
How long have you been in that one for?
43 years.
Okay. A long time then.
Yeah.
Anyways, how's your week been so far?
Oh, busy.
Work
Just
busy. Okay.
I think in lockdown, the university is extremely busy because we've still got the students to deal with, and liaising with businesses around new streams of business funding, around what we're going to talk about, around the digital, the IT, and particularly one of my particular interests is digital ethics. We're not just in AI, but like the consequences of AI on society, and who has the right to the data, et cetera, and what are people doing with that data that we don't necessarily know about when we sign up to things. So
definitely
that's an area of interest.
I think I think there's definitely a lot of things to get into, especially in digital technology. So let's start off by sort of just letting people know who you are, what you do. You work in Newcastle University as a senior lecturer, as an associate professor as well, but I'll let you take it on from there. I think for me, you're sort of like a unicorn because you're involved in everything technology, whether it being AI, blockchain, any emerging technology that is relevant for innovation,
Yeah.
So that's my take on it. But I'll leave you to do proper
Yeah, I'll give a bit of
introductions.
background to that. So it kind of came out
Yeah.
of working when I was at Durham University and had a discussion with a professor there in accounting and finance around blockchain and Bitcoin. And we worked on a paper together with that, which then spurred my interest in all sorts of connotations around who has power over the data, the system, and could this potentially threaten the current financial system and become mainstream, and the social side of that. So to put that in context, when I was at Durham University after leaving industry as a project manager and program manager, which we'll come back to,
Yeah.
I studied sociology and behavioral psychology, which is quite useful because once you understand how people think and why they think that, and then how they behave in the social, and put that together, overlaying the fintech space and the technology space that we're now in, the digital economy, it makes quite an interesting to sit at that social technical intersection and sort of say, well, how does trustworthiness manifest itself in technology? How do the engineers do that? So I co-lead 2 projects with the School of Computing looking at FinTrust, so financial trust and how is it engineered in the technology, but also FinClusion, which is just finished, which was funded by the Gates Foundation and the Turing Institute, which was looking at verifiable credentials. So this is a very emergent area, looking at giving the power of us to hold on our phones our credentials, such as a passport, a driving license, and a utility bill, all the usual things you would use to identify yourself and verify yourself digitally. But we also took a little bit further and said, okay, if we weren't the average person, if we were on the periphery of society, how can we address the digital divide, and what sorts of verifiable credentials can we use for people who don't have the usual 3 suspects that I've just named? So that was an interesting piece of work. We did a prototype using Microsoft Ion software to do a prototype. Okay. The next step of that will be towards something called self-sovereign ID, which means that you will only reveal an attribute of that credential to prove who you are. So for instance, if we weren't in mainstream, but we could have an NHS number that is verified by the issuer, the NHS, to say Karen is who she says she is, I just pass on my NHS number, nothing else, to the person who wants it verified, and that should be enough. Now that opens up a whole raft of issues around tech, etc. But that's where the future's going. So it's emergent at the moment, but also it has implications for agile management, what project managers need to use, how we need to think in a more agile way. So that's kind of where I am at the moment. Yeah. This social technical kind of bridge, as it were, to sort of think about
technical. Yeah, I like
I'm all for innovation, like say more innovation in emergent technology, but what's the societal impact, and particularly for those who reside in what's known as the digital divide, and how do we make sure that it's an equitable digital society that doesn't just benefit the few and leave the many sort of stranded, not being able to connect, not being able to benefit from the things that you or I do in that space.
And I think that's so relevant these days, because I think most organizations are driven by commercial reasons at the end of the day, and sometimes not even commercial reasons. It's just by pure passion, or innovation or technology, or just pushing the boundaries of that without consciously, taking a step back to look at the implications. Technology can be great, it can expand and extend a lot of things, but do we need that? Ethically, what are the implications of that? And that's why it's very important that you are taking steps to sort of look at that. But like you said, it's very emergent. Are there a lot of bodies or parties or organizations doing this? So the second one you mentioned FinTrust, but the second one you mentioned was FinClusion.
Yeah, and it's a much used term. Since I found out that financial inclusion merged. And we've been working with former MPs, lots of different companies. I have to give a shout out to MasterCard, because MasterCard are investing a lot of money in trying to, not just be a monopolizer, to try and look into how they can do things better for society. So I have to give them a real shout out. They've got lots of great data that they're collating. They're collaborating with lots of different people. So that's a good thing from what you would call maybe
100%
traditional financial service is actually starting to adapt, and there's a lot of people in there who want to do good things around tech. Is it perfect? No, but it's a start. It's a move forward. And
Yeah.
but as you
I
said,
think.
there'll always be this
Mhm.
tension between the old cliche of profit versus purpose, and how do you balance the two? Because if you go into business as a startup, you've got to make a profit, but also if you've got the
100%.
purpose,
Yeah.
how do you make a profit out of the purpose and keep it going so that it does, the term tech for good, that it delivers something for good. It's a difficult one to balance. And then, if you're a serial entrepreneur and you've got an exit strategy to sell it to whatever, to Microsoft, Google, whatever, then your own moral stance comes in. Do you sell it to one of the giants, or do you keep it separate?
Because you're not sure what they would do with it. Yeah.
No, well,
Yeah.
as you
Yeah.
pointed, you've got this balance between innovation and regulation. You've got this equilibrium going on. That too much regulation will stifle the innovation, but the innovation at the moment seems to be above the regulation, and the regulators are unfortunately in the position of always trying to catch up with the latest innovation. And then the companies who are already regulated are saying, well, hey, it's not a level playing field. They're off doing this. We've got to do this. That's stifling our
Got to
ability.
compete. Yeah.
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 So it's
That's
definitely interesting.
that. So I've always had this question, and I'm not sure if we've spoken about this before. It's the whole concept behind competition as a driver for innovation, or is it more based on problems and needs? And actually, so now being user focused or customer focused, right? And identifying the problems and trying to solve the problems there. I
Mm.
feel like, things can get lost, priorities can get lost, ethics can get, thrown out the window when competition is that motivator for innovation.
I
Is
think
that
so.
something is that something you've noticed as well?
I
Yeah.
think so. I
Yeah.
mean, even in the open banking, open finance sphere, that's still a relatively small share of the overall market. It's about 13-14%. But I mean, the ethos drive behind that was to break open competition, break the monopoly of the traditional incumbent banks and financial services, and get you to share the
Yeah.
data through the APIs, and to have
Open banking, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, to have third parties off you. And has it been successful? Yes, to a certain extent. But again, there's still caveats surrounding this race to open up. Does that then become an opportunity, like you say, to get ahead without the ethical consequences on society pushing ahead? I mean, I made the rather controversial comment on one panel I sat on that said fintech is still predominantly a middle class privilege. And it is, if you look at the figures, the people,
What do
because
you
you've
mean by
got,
that? Sorry.
well, you've got to have
Hmm.
the access, you've got to have a laptop, you've got to be able to pay for broadband connection on a monthly basis. You've got to have the digital skills to understand and navigate. I mean, I don't know if you've looked in the decentralized finance space, the DeFi, that needs a lot of skills to understand the technical side of it. That I would say, my opinion, that a lot of people don't have that in the digital divide. So you get this again, literally a divide between those who can have access and benefit from investing and getting the returns on the investment quickly in the DeFi space or the new innovation, and you've got those who to a certain extent don't know it exists, don't know what benefits it could bring them. And there are people
Yeah.
working to sort of level this up and giving free courses on digital skills and breaking the myths around maths or whatever barriers it might be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's why I made the comment when I was sat on a panel of white middle class educated people that none of us have come from a poorer background. We've all come from maybe working lower middle class to upper working class, got educated, and we know about,
Puts you in a
yeah,
puts you in a
we
position
know
to
we're
talk about that
educated,
more
we're
readily.
aware.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you
Yeah.
think about the channels, if you weren't aware, if you were a single mom on an estate just deciding, do I pay for broadband or do I put food on the table? Or I've been a homeless
Yeah.
person. What are the critical barriers to you investing in the DeFi space, for instance. If you start to unpack it, you can see that it's just not equal based on what you know and who you know. Which you could argue has always been the case in society, right? But again, as we move towards cashless society, we still have to have the caveat of, okay, if we're moving towards cashless society, we've got to have that transitional period, and we've got to understand that environment of the impact of removing cash as a transaction. You know, when we talk about financial inclusion, people have even stripped it right back to saying it's the right to be able to transact, not just to be able to open a bank account. No, the ability to transact, to buy things, you know, to to do that. Because again, if you make it a condition that it has to be a bank account, they're just becoming part of that system where potentially the algorithms at some point will have some bias against them, which they've already experienced. So that there's lots of questions still emerging now. So
the question I have for that, which I'm sure you've probably been asked a couple of times, I'm probably thinking about, it's not an easy question as well to answer. How do you mitigate that?
How do you mitigate
these financial tech companies are, you know, just going ahead, innovating with technology, but it's more focused on the middle class, isn't it? But the majority of people, in terms of inclusion, that who need to transact, you know, are not sensitized well enough to use these technologies. It's probably going to put them in a worse off situation in being able to transact, going towards this paperless economy that we're talking about. How do we get these big financial organizations to sort of take a step back and be more user focused?
I think it's moving towards that. The trouble is, I use the example of credit scoring. Okay, one of my projects is to look at explainability of the decision-making processes. Right now, that can be a human algorithm. So you and I sit down, we're trained in a bank that this is how we credit score Olby, who wants to apply for a mortgage. What do we look at? We look at your income, but we also look at your postcode to see if that's the average income we can predict. We don't really look at your flexible expenditure. We can see what it's historic data. So it might be over the last 3 years, we get your returns and make a sort of intuitive human judgment that roughly this is what Olby earns as an income on a regular level. Here are some of his fixed costs. But also based on his postcode, which could be biased. I mean, you might be far out earning your postcode, for instance. His salary is probably going to be that based on historic, not current data. And then you think, how's that fair? and there's many instances where also people go, well, I went for credit. Say, I know I've got X amount of money in the bank. I went to buy one of these buy now, pay later schemes for a sofa or a piece of furniture, a big ticket item, refused credit. Why? And when you trace back, because you see the credit agencies aren't allowed to tell you why you've been refused credit.
Yeah.
Because again, the fraudsters would then get that information and defraud the system as to how they calculate this. So you're not allowed to know. But it turns out a case that I know about, applied for credit, they were perfectly credit worthy, but the offer of credit for that day, the target had been reached. So they were turned down for credit because their giving out credit had been reached for that company for that day. But the consequence of it is that person then gets a decline for credit that sits on their credit scoring for 7 years. So even though they could have had credit if there'd been just one more credit offer for that day.
Timing.
So the system is biased and broken. It's noisy. We need to read it, but it's that kind of Einstein thinking around it, is that this is what we've always done. So and then you get generations of people trained on this is
Making the
how
same mistakes.
this is how
Yes.
you
Yeah.
do credit scoring. These are the metrics you look at. This is how it works. This is how we get an estimate of what Karen or Obi earn. And then we apply a credit score to it, whether you're credit worthy. Whereas what open banking's done is said, okay, let's base that on live data. So we've got an end of day account. So whatever you and I have spent today, either online or normal times, coffee shops or whatever, getting lunch, then they would have like an end of day balance. They'd also be able to look and see the regular payment that I'm getting from Newcastle University, paying my salary each month. They'd also see my fixed cost like mortgage, car payments, electricity, council tax, like that. But they'd also get an insight into my more flexible payments. How much am I traveling? Am I overspending? Am I purchasing lots of shoes or whatever? But it would give you that real time update on what I'm doing. And then you could say, there's a case where somebody had been paying £1,000 in rent for several years. So £1,000 a month in rent, applied for a mortgage for £1,000 a month and was refused. And that's because of the way it's historically calculated. Whereas with open banking, they could look and go, they've been paying £1,000 a month out in rent for several years. So they could pay it in a mortgage. And it's these things that I always think in systems, that a lot of systems, social systems, financial systems that we've got, once you demand of them, they tend to fail us a lot of the time. And because there's inherent biases. Now, is that all technical? No. Humans are biased. There's a great book out by the famous Daniel Kahneman that's just come out called Noise. So that's a book I would recommend. So it's the flaws in human judgment.
Taking notes.
Yeah, flaws in human judgment. So he's like a behavioral psychologist, economist, Nobel winner for his writing. So he wrote Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, which is also good about our reactions as humans. And so now he talks about, and I look at bias in algorithms that underpin machine learning and then aggregate it up to AI. But he talks about, it starts with humans anyway, because we create the programs, the models, and the data set that we're working on. Your audience and everybody will be aware of where has been cock-ups, for want of a better word, with algorithms like Amazon's famous HR one, hiring software engineers. They fed it on historic data. So it rejected everybody who wasn't male, a software engineer degree, a computer science degree, and of a certain age. It didn't consider anybody else because that's what the model had been trained on the data. What do software engineers look like? Oh, well, we've always hired male, white, educated to a certain level. Right, okay, that's what I need to hire. And these are those things. So back to Kahneman, he said the trouble is that our brains at any one time bias. So we have this inbuilt bias from our education, our ethnicity, our peer group,
environment,
our education, like I say, our training in industry. This is how you do credit scoring. So why change it? Because it's always worked. But noisy in terms that we've always got kind of an emotional influence going on. So the great example he has in the book, 2 examples. First one, judges. So they're all trained the same. They all know the law. They've all practiced. They've all experienced in sentencing people. But what he found was, looking over, it's quite funny because I'm a football fan, but basically if their football team lost, like ours did last weekend, then heaven help the person who stood in front of a judge on Monday morning after we missed the penalty shootout, because what they're saying with this noise in the head, the disappointment of England losing, meant that the judge was severe in his sentencing, irrespective of what he would do. And Kahneman trialed this over a variety of judges, which is inherently human. We can't totally get rid of it. And this is when you're looking at ethics and trying to look at explainable AI, you can't fully explain it. One, because the machine learning engineers can't explain black boxes in full yet at the neural network deep learning level, which then translates in machine learning aggregated up. So if we can't explain it in human terms with accuracy about the cause and the prediction ability, the cause, effect, and prediction models for certainty, then we can't translate it in something humans go, oh, this is how you do it. Now, simpler ones you can. People have started to remove the black box element and make sure that their algorithms are transparent. But older ones, they are just a black box. We don't entirely know how they work.
Yeah. So that's a big question as well. I mean, you touched on it earlier with something you said. It's about the diversity and the inclusion in the tech environment. Now, what does it take? So it's not even diversity in terms of sex or race per se, but it's even age as well. Because when you have, people who have done something a conventional way predominantly, there are no, say, for example, younger people in the room to say, that wouldn't work for me. I wouldn't be able to get a mortgage based on this algorithm, based on this set rules. So it's about sort of having, that's the essence of this collaboration, and having a mixed sort of group or mixed room, so
it's
that, a lot of these gaps,
it's a
yes, are
decision
not
making.
missed out.
If you strip it back in a general term, when we're having these algorithms programmed, the people who make the decisions at the moment are predominantly 80% white males, 20% others. Now, that doesn't reflect society, and it doesn't work. There's been instances with Alexa where, young girls have said, when's the World Football Finals on? Meaning the women's football finals, the World Cup. There is no World Cup this year, because it's not being programmed for this diversity. And that's a huge problem. And similarly with the mortgages, the mortgage is based around the stereotype, probably my age, over 50s, cohabiting with a partner, got a teenager about to go to university. No, not everybody looks like that. I mean, some people my age have never been married, they're quite transient, they've got money. There's instances of millionaires who've never, ever, ever had credit because they didn't need it. Decided to go for a mortgage, can't get one. They might have millions in the bank, but they can't get a mortgage because they've never had credit. So they're invisible. And then you broaden that out to a person at the other end of the scale who also has never had credit. They're also excluded from transacting, because basically the inclusion is the ability to transact, not to hold a bank account with an incumbent. It's just to transact. And that's where the kind of broader thinking in the decentralized finance world is interesting. It's a bit of a Wild West. If you are going to go down that route, then take some advice from people who are already playing in the area. That's what I've done. Because it's just, you have to have the time and the space to wrap your head around what's going on at the moment before you start investing or doing Bitcoin and Ether and messing around with how you invested. But in theory, what I'm learning from them is that we could have a better system whereby you kind of get a return on paying your mortgage every month. You get some percentage back for paying, because the money is traded off and lent across like this decentralized system. So what always fascinated me about blockchain and Bitcoin was this kind of, for want of a better word, showing my age, like a hippie concept, that nobody owned it, that we all contributed to it, and we kept the miners trustworthy because it was an immutable system. Everybody could see it. Nobody could change it once it went into the blocks and was encrypted. And therefore, hey man, we're all part of this.
It's a market system,
rather than, you pay to have a current account, you pay to have access to your own money, and then you're also charged 39% now if you go into an overdraft. Some companies operate on their overdraft, but imagine their charges per day. So there's something very wrong in our financial systems, and that spills over into the social systems, because if we strip it back, like you say, that basic ability to transact underpins a lot of our social life. If you can't transact, even in cash,
Oh
because
yes.
you don't have an account, or
Yeah.
you're stuffing your cash under the bed, for want of a better word. You still got problems. You've still got problems
Yeah.
dealing with our systems and the interaction of those systems that kind of say, computer says no to you, but yes to you because you fit this profile better.
It's not robust. That's not very robust, isn't
It's
it?
not equitable. I mean, I bandy this term because in academia, the research councils came up with this strap line. What I liked was an equitable digital society, and I thought, yeah, that's something to aim towards. And there's lots of there's not just me. There's loads of people driving this, and the key to that again is collaboration. Understand that businesses need
Collaboration. Yeah.
understand businesses need to make money, period. Otherwise you wouldn't do it. But also, can we have a bit more of that digital responsibility of what businesses are doing digitally? So with digital and data within their companies, are they being ethical? What are the reasons they're keeping people's data? What are they doing with it, etc.? And then by the company. So if the company are using your data to build tools or whatever, what's the consequences of that? How does it work? I mean, for
Yeah.
instance, GDPR came out, and we had this flurry of, you probably got them as well, emails saying, oh, we want you to keep with us, please sign up to our GDPR, otherwise we're going to break the law, basically. And now what do we do? It's
Yeah.
kind of become a norm that it flashes up and you just go, you don't read the T's and C's, just go yes, because you want to see what's on the page. So GDPR,
Yeah. Yeah.
in a means to protect you and your data, has now become a kind of trade-off between, oh, my data privacy, desire to see what's on the page. Guess which one's stronger for a human? Desire.
Desire.
Desire to see whatever it is, whether it's something about England, whether it's Roger Federer,
Yeah.
whatever, a horse on a page. It's something, it's like, oh yeah, okay, I agree. Yeah, agree, fine. Just show me what's on the page. And this is a difficulty we've got, and this is why, Oxford and Cambridge have got ethical AI centres and centres looking at this. But I want to push it a little bit further to broaden it out about, not just in the financial vertical, but across like data, cybersecurity, society, business, and even education, because we've got kind of a gap in the educator side.
Oh yes.
Because if
Yeah,
you look at the
definitely.
universities, how many people have fintech in their title? There's only me in the business school. And even then it's in brackets. It's not officially recognized as a subject. It has no specific program for it. And that's something that needs to be changed. And there are some universities now running courses, but a few.
It definitely does seem that the education system needs to catch up. The formal education system, in any case, needs to catch up. The IT industry specifically, I feel, moves very fast. It's the emergence of what agile is. Agile is such a big word, and in a lot of ways, things we've already mentioned incorporate agile, the collaboration, cross-functional teams working together, all of that is part of the whole agile concept. And it's, with all these sort of initiatives moving across the industry, the educational system needs to catch up, right?
I agree.
But how does that happen? How
Well,
does that happen?
people like
Because
me
it's such a
pushing
structured system. Yeah.
people like
So
me
that's why we have you here, is to give us
pushing
the,
from the
yeah,
inside,
yeah.
saying, look, I want to
Yes.
create programs. I don't want to write it by myself. I want to write it with someone from industry. Because as you will know, the big criticism of universities, we get these graduates, but we have to retrain them because they don't know X, Y, and Z.
They don't
They've got the
fit into,
theory,
yeah.
but they haven't had the chance to put that into practice or truly apply it. So that is changing. I mean, universities do have internships, etc., but I think we can do more. We can do more. We can move to where the courses are truly co-created. That if you want to do a fintech course, that you have to co-create it with a fintech to actually make it worth. And I think they've done that at Edinburgh. I think they called in people and said,
But
what would you like to
you
see?
you need capacity to do that. You need a lot of flexibility to do that. I mean, I guess definitely from the student's point of view, they would be open to that. But from the back end, so you guys who are actually delivering the programs, do you have that capacity? Do you have that flexibility to, integrate and, form these sort of programs you've spoken about?
Yeah.
How flexible is the university towards that? Because I'd imagine, it's a
It's starting to change, but I think there's a
okay.
recognition. I probably unpopular in many meetings for saying that we are not agile enough, and then it's like, oh no, she's on about project management again, and everything in life is a project,
Mm-mm.
everything. And I said,
Exactly.
why do we
Exactly.
call them degree programs? And we give the students projects to write and work on projects
Exactly.
if they're not relevant. And like you say, the agile, I always split it up. Like I work with Bard Consultancy in London who do agile training, and I get them to come up and train the students. And it's always agile with a big A and a little a. So everybody will have heard that. So you've got agile, the framework,
Mm-hmm.
this is how you do it. But it's agile with a little a, the mindset, the growth mindset, the looking beyond what's in it for me, as to it's a team effort. We can't do it all by ourselves. And I think we need that in education to a certain extent, because the way education at the higher level, at least as well, is set up for individual goals. If I write more papers than you and I bring in more money than you, I'm ergo a better academic. But am I really?
Mm.
Am I really? Or is it just a metric? So it's, but if we collaborate, if you bring your knowledge and I bring my knowledge, I would argue there's a good chance, probability, that the work would be better because there's more minds. And that's why I work interdisciplinary with computer science. It's quite unusual to have a grant between the business school and computer science. We were one of the first to do it at Newcastle, and now it's starting to permeate, it's starting to push through. And there's more people coming into academia like me who've worked in industry first and going, you need to be more pro-academic. You need to merge the
Mm-hmm.
two, because you lose something one without
Yeah.
the other. Theory is good from what I've learned over the years. The theoretical insights I can interpret, I can use and apply it. But also you can't
Mm-hmm.
underestimate the experience and the expertise that somebody who's worked in industry at the top of their game for 30 years can bring to
Has.
say, this is how that model works. You're struggling to get access and understand how it works. This is what I've experienced, and this is how you can do it.
And 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 I think they bring industry being practical in the industry gives you real insight on real problems
Yeah.
behind any theoretical approach, isn't it? So these are the problems behind this technology. This is
Yeah.
why it's difficult to make it work. This is how people react to it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and those things are that's why it's very important to have that sort of collaboration between education and the actual industry. One question I did want to ask, because I feel like we're just on the topic right now as well. There are a lot of young people who are interested in getting into the industry, and they're coming from all different types of situations. Some are quite young, young enough to, the path is to go to university, get a degree. Some, maybe because of economic reasons, might not have that opportunity or the option for a degree, whatever the case may be. Um, when when a young individual, for example, is trying to get into IT, there's a big question about qualifications from these qualification bodies, getting experience, just going straight into internships or going down the degree route.
Mm-hmm.
How do you answer that question um, um, from a young person trying to get into the industry?
It
How do I get in? Yeah,
It
yeah.
is difficult, and it depends on the philosophy and the outlook of each company. Because so someone like
Mm,
Accenture have recently, like a bit like Google, they've kind of said you don't necessarily have to have a degree. We'll take you on an apprenticeship kind of model. But again, these are extremely competitive, and you're not privy to know what the metrics are to get on that behind it. Like, you don't know what the entry is. Is it
Yeah.
we stick
Yeah.
you in an assessment center and decide if you're competent or a peer competent? But it could be that the very introverted person has just as good ideas as someone who's more extroverted like me. Okay, who's not afraid to kind of say, well, I think we should do this, and this is the reasons why. You could get someone who's like the opposite, who's pretty quiet, and I'll just sit. And I learned this as leading teams. I mean, I went into industry at 16, straight from education, ironically, because I just didn't like it. I just wanted more to explore. I just
But it's been a turnaround now.
yeah. I found it too restrictive in basic schooling, secondary schooling. I found it too restrictive. You know, I always tell the people same thing. I wanted to study Egyptian hieroglyphs in history, but I wasn't. I had to study the English feudal system, which was boring in comparison, but we had to do it. There was no options. And therefore, you know, people who, when I was leaving school, careers advice was nowhere near what it is today. And it was just like, what do you want to do? You like horses? Yeah, but I don't want to work with horses because there's no money and there's no career unless you own the horses. And I was like, right, go work in an office. That was kind of it. If you're not going to university and you're female, you go in an office, or, you know, if you're horsey, you want to do horsey, but no career. And then I sort of fell into project management by accident, really. I didn't know what, a lot of people will say that my age, they didn't know that that's what it was at the time. But you fell into it. So now we fast forward to now, there's much better career advice opportunities, but still it's difficult to get into that data sphere unless you have the piece of paper that says you've studied it. And I say it's that hard balance. I think the apprenticeship schemes are good. I know we run one at Newcastle where a company sponsors somebody to train. So you're working and you're getting the training at the same time. So you'll get the qualification. Yep. But to go in cold, as it were, go to a company, say, I want to do data. What's your experience? Don't really have much, but I'm good at programming and coding, say, or even I just have an interest. Then I think that question is not being fully addressed. I think some companies will go there, but there are courses online, sort of like Udemy and Code Academy, will give you those details that you want to do.
A nudge, but
it's still hard to find a company that will not have a prerequisite of data science or computer science when you're going into a real tech environment. I remember asking the question for my own son. So he's going to university in September. And I was asking these questions, you know, if he tries to get in a company around the data, etc., and like get a degree. You know, that's the answer, because you're up against the mass of people who've got degrees or not got degrees. And then it's a risk for the hiring company, isn't it? Do we go with the person with the degree or not the degree? What can they do? I don't really know. Therefore, it's a risk. Therefore, they're biased. Right? They're too risky. Let's go where the person's got the degree. Does the person who's got the degree necessarily than the person that hasn't? It depends on each and every case. And the problem is that, a bit like credit scoring, because your competition are hiring people with degrees, what do? You want to make sure that you've got enough skills. So there is a huge skills gap. And I think this is where they've got to try and address it. They've got to be a balance. Like, people might not know that they've got an affinity to coding, programming, or even just understanding it. Like I do. I'm never going to be a top programmer or coder, but I've done the courses. I understand the basics. I know how a machine learning model is built. I know you can do logistic regression, k-nearest neighbors, etc., to build those models. But could I be a machine learning engineer? Probably not. I'd have to do a fair few years to be good at it. But this is where it's required, because you're getting a skills gap and a talent pipeline. And I'm also passionate about trying to match companies with the talent pipeline that's coming through. And like you say, working from primary school level upwards to educate kids and say, this is how the system works.
Starting it.
How you do finances. There's also this technology side, and try to remove that kind of myth busting around the maths that underpins it as well, to try and reduce the fear of maths. Because I've had many, particularly female students, who are, oh, it's maths, and there's like this inbuilt fear that it's techie, it's maths. It is changing. It is changing. We've got great movements like the STEMs, STEMettes, and pushing, and Will I Am back in California has set up money for training women in STEM subjects. So that's great. So there's pockets of where it is changing, which is great. But we still need, I
I
think,
think,
the UK system, there's still much more that can be done to push it forward.
100%. Yeah. I think when I generally get asked that question by someone who's just, coming off uni or trying to break into the industry from another sort of area of specialization, what I say is just do what you can. Whatever resources are really available to you,
Yeah.
use it. Something someone told me, a software developer told me earlier in the industry, have a portfolio, have sort of mini projects,
Yeah,
something you've done that you can sell, even if
absolutely.
not directly for the technical skills, for the transferable skills, and know what those transferable skills are. So when you're sitting in front of an interview or a hiring manager, you can say, this is what I've done, and it's important, and you can translate that. So I think sometimes it's not necessarily having a degree, because now what we're seeing, there was on Instagram, coincidentally, the other day, there was a young lady who came up and she spoke about having, I think, about quite a few years of retail experience, and today she's a product manager, right? And she's an expert. It's like she's an IT expert, and that's what she was saying. And she was just basically talking about the transferable skills she had gotten from retail. Obviously, she had to do her research, understand the domain a bit better. But effectively, she was able to transfer. And I guess, other things came into play, the right opportunity, the right person in front of you who understands that those sort of more conventional requirements are not knowing not to be so rigid on those conventional requirements, like
We're back to agility again.
yeah,
And if you think
yeah,
about it, it's peeling back to the person, to people. If you think tech has been built by people for people to use, but ultimately you concentrate on yourself, and that also YouTube is a phenomenal resource that's free. So I know
yeah.
my kind of machine learning engineers that I'm working with, because I went off and did a machine learning course just because I wanted to, just to continuously learn and expand my knowledge. And they said, also look on YouTube, and there's a great series called 3 Brown, 1 Blue. And it goes through the whole series from like linear algebra to
Three
how we
brown, three
3
brown, one
brown,
blue.
1 blue. And you can
Okay.
subscribe to the series, and it has different series. So the series on linear algebra to understand the basic underpinnings of the mathematics that go into the digital side. Then it progresses all the way through to how you run all the different regressions, the nearest neighbors, the clustering, etc., the supervised and unsupervised learning, and what the pros and cons are, which one works better with large complex data sets, what results you can expect to get, underfitting, overfitting the models, all these kind of terms that you would probably be unfamiliar with, you can get for free looking at YouTube, which is a great companion to doing a degree or not doing a degree. Just it's as good as a degree worth on there to an extent. And then if you apply that, like you say, if you set yourself up a little project to do using machine learning, you could build your own little models and get data sets. You can get free data online, it's anonymous open source data, and just build little machine models, follow on there. They've
Do
also got
something, isn't it?
We've
Yeah,
also
yeah.
got chat functions, discussion forums. So if you're stuck, like, oh, my nearest neighbor network's not working, what have I done? Here's my code. What have I done wrong with the code? And someone say, oh, right, you need a comma there, or you need to tell it to do here. You've missed that command to instruct the program what to do. That's why it's not working. So there's lots of resources that you can try.
I think.
Yeah.
I think definitely a trend that is within the IT industry, and I think the IT industry is at the forefront of that, and other industries will start to follow suit very soon, is the entry requirements for getting into it. I know loads. to be honest, a few of the best software engineers I work with don't have a computer science degree.
No.
And that's a trend in the industry as well. People are even starting from a way younger age, from the age of 12. You have the access to the computer.
Mhm.
You have most of those applications and IDEs available. You can download them and start playing about. And by the time you get to university, for example, you're in your class. And I've heard this from some people, and it's like they don't feel like they're learning, and they already have. Because when I think about it, when I think about education, right, these days with the internet, everything you really need is out there. It's on the internet and it's free, right?
Mhm.
But the problem is the noise. There's so much. And it's like, I feel this is what educational institutions do. They bring all that noise and they put into a package and it says, and hopefully if they're doing it right, they're working with industry and they say,
Yeah.
this is the foundation. This is what you really need. And they say, follow this, do this project, do this course, blah, 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 blah. And if you do this, you'll be in a good place. And I feel like that's the benefit, one of the major benefits of the educational system. But sometimes some people are lucky enough to have a mentor or a family member who's already
A
within
programmer
that field and
role.
can tell you,
Yeah.
okay,
And
yeah,
again, this is where
if you want to do this,
we go back to, your social advantage, social divide. It depends on where you were born, how lucky you are. Have you got
yeah,
access to a laptop? Do you know what programming is?
very true.
Does your school have sufficient machines for you to access and stay
Hmm.
computing clubs and that sort of thing? Do we get around this? Does a community have a place you can go to practice coding and programming? And I'm always asked now, people
Hmm.
say to me, what's the top 3 skills that you think are vital for the future? And I'll say coding, programming,
Yes.
critical thinking. You need the critical thinking to do the problem solving. So your coding, program, critical thinking. Now, do you have to be a great programmer or coder? No, because you can work in a team. But if you understand just the basics in whatever language, Python is one of the easiest to learn, or R. So if you can understand the basics in Python and R, then the more complicated languages, Java, C++, etc., you can still discuss with the engineer
Did,
what they're actually doing.
did you say coding? So coding or programming, then
Coding,
critical
programming,
thinking.
so
What was it?
3. So coding, programming, critical thinking. Because if you know how
What
to
would you?
put down prose
Hmm.
and you can't think, like you were saying, putting that into a framework, into a context to solve a problem, to address an issue, then if you can code and program but you can't critically think and analyze for yourself, then you're missing something. And I think that's the thing about bridging the practice and the theory. What education does for you
Hmm.
at a higher level is teach those critical thinking skills, which
Hmm.
should be, in my opinion, introduced earlier in the secondary education, or at least in the further education
Yeah.
when you're doing A levels a bit more, because it's not. And then there's
Hmm.
this huge jump from just being force fed information and regurgitating it in exams.
Yeah.
It's just a memory test most of the time. You're just going to remember
Yeah. Exactly.
how to do linear algebra and the fractions. And if you can regurgitate it, then you get the higher marks. If you've got a poor memory, you're not going to be really good at examinations. But is that teaching you to think?
Mm.
No. And that's why
Mm.
I really didn't like school, because I've probably always been curious and a thinker and going, well, why does that work?
Yeah.
Why do we have to do it that way? And why? And it was only afterwards when I left, and then I went back to college because it was offered as part of the workers. And I thought, all right, okay, I'll go back and sit. And then when I realized I could have more freedom to study different things, I said, actually, this is okay. This is okay. But I kept
Yeah.
working
Yeah.
and studying. So I did 2 degrees whilst
Yeah.
I was working, and then went into academia full time and did 2 more. And
Mm. Mm.
but it's just the way I didn't plan it that way.
Yeah.
But if I was young, starting out now, I would definitely code, program,
Coding
and have
program.
critical thinking.
I
Critical
think
thinking.
something I'll I think something I'll add on to that is just interpersonal skills, being
Yeah.
able to collaborate effectively. I think it's so key, being able to work. Being Last year, I had a go at entrepreneurship. And I think one of the major things, I've put a pause on that, and hopefully I'll circle back to that, in the future. But um, I think one thing I've learned, you can't do everything alone. You cannot do everything alone, and you need to be able to work with people
Absolutely.
effectively.
There's no
Yeah.
one
So
person who can do everything in a space that needs to be done, particularly in organizations. There's just no way. And it's like when
and
we
even
work on research, what would our research be if we didn't have participants?
voila, exactly.
We wouldn't meet.
what what kind so this everything I feel is connected, because this goes back to design thinking as well.
Yep.
Have as a developer, for example, working on an application, and everything is sort of in your head, and it's, oh, this is perfect, or people are going to use this, these are the features people need, without having that feedback, without having that prototyping, without empathizing with your user base. You never know. And I spoke to a friend of mine, and he said the first app he built, he basically just had everything in his head, himself and his co-founder, and they spent 6 months building something that didn't really sort of get traction. And what he learned is, he says something funny, and the way he said it, it was like, I wasted 6 months of my life because he didn't have that feedback,
No.
and I that's why it's so critical to have that in terms of working in an agile way. So I think I definitely want to emphasize that getting into the industry, if we're going to break it down, the skills that are relevant today and for the future:
Absolutely.
coding,
And yeah.
programming, critical
I was
thinking,
thinking,
and
and again, I
interpersonal
would say the
skills.
next one after that, probably on a par with the third one, like you say, is collaboration. I always, whenever people say to me,
Collaboration.
give
Yeah.
me your keywords at the end of a panel or something, I go collaboration, 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 because you just get, like we started out before. What fascinates me is that the decision making processes and a lot of systems that we have only been from a narrow perspective, and they just no longer reflect the diversity that we live in at all. So they needed a good overhaul, and that's across all the systems: the financial, the education, the political, the economic.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
we've seen that these are complex adaptive systems. They're all interdependent. You make a change in one, like COVID comes in, all of the rest have to adapt and change. Everything has changed. We've seen that. Because people say,
Yeah.
complex adaptive system. I went, well, COVID is the change point. So that punctuated the equilibrium of the global society and demanded change. I mean, with that punctuated equilibrium, all the systems around COVID have had to adapt and change to coexist with it. And we're still going to have to coexist with it. And if you think about that principle about different shifts in the market, the move from machine learning to AI to deep learning to, Google announced yesterday they're now gone even further, and they're going towards deep learning that can perceive. And on the one hand, I think great. On the other hand, I'm like, do I want it?
What does that mean?
Do I
Yes.
want it to be more human? I'm not sure I do.
That can
There's always,
perceive.
I can perceive, because
Like,
yeah,
in what way? Like
what
emotionally,
is it going to
or
perceive,
can
and
just
how are you going to deploy
yeah,
it?
what is it
Are you going to
perceiving?
remove the human
Yeah.
who perceives and put the AI in? Because again, it's like
That's interesting.
for humanity,
Yeah.
we're doing great work around the risks of AI and what standards should be in place to manage the risk. Because I had a chat with the guy who set that up, and he was on the same wavelength, because we come from sort of risk project management backgrounds. And I said to him, I always think we create all the machine learning and the AI, but who checks that it has this semi-autonomous ability to learn? But who checks that that learning is what we think it should or ought to be? And what's the consequences of the ability of it to learn autonomously?
But I do have a question on that, because even when we're talking about individuals,
Yeah.
there's group identity as well, right? So
Mhm.
in terms of bias, we have individual bias and we have group bias as
Yep.
well. So when we talk about regulation, um,
Yeah. Who makes the regulatory
is it
decisions?
exactly, because a lot of these decisions. Let's talk about the power sector, the
They have
electricity,
vested interests. They have
the energy
vested
sector.
interests in it.
Yes,
I always talk about
so
this.
yes,
Yeah. If you think about it, if you
go
look at
on,
the
yeah.
tech industry now, okay, we've got monopolizers at the top, so the
Hmm.
big tech firms,
Hmm.
tech giants
Hmm.
are monopolizing the tech space. I know either banks and stuff don't know as much as they do or what they can do in that space. And then coming
Yeah.
down, you've got what Alpha call corporate rationalizers. So there's people in the middle, like the fintechs, who are trying to change the system, break up the monopolies, lobbying against saying, tech for good, open banking, doing all these things. So you've got this middle layer of corporate rationalizers trying to say, we need to change the system. And then at the bottom layer, in short, you've got the communities. And in that sort of layer there, roughly, you've got different players in there who have vested interests in deciding who gets what in the system. So you can call them street level
Exactly.
bureaucrats. Okay. So different
Hmm.
institutions, banks, financial services, social services, whatever, they have the power to decide what the community gets across a whole range of services, health services, welfare, finance, education, the lot. Where you
Hmm.
live, if you
Hmm.
you live near a school that's got a bad postcode, oh dear, sorry, you either have to move or you go to that school.
Mm.
And so someone makes
Yeah.
that decision that that's how it's going to be. And as you said, when the regulators, although there are people in the regulating space who want to change, who want it to do more than it does, it's still predominantly the few who make the decisions for the many. I mean, it's thrown out
Yeah.
to consultation, but then who's consulted? The ones who have a vested interest in the regulation working for them, right? So, and talk
Follow the
about
money.
public engagement. It's very
Yeah.
difficult again to get the public to be aware of a consultation, to understand the ramifications of a public consultation on a topic, and then feel enabled to speak to that agenda. Because they might think, well, I don't want to take part because I'm
It's
not really sure what that is or what it means. And
it's
then,
like exactly like you said. It's
yeah.
yeah.
So then if a public consultation goes out, what you tend to find, if you looked at the data of who participates, you find the same sets of people answering the public content, consultation cries based on their interest in the community, because that, sense of power for them, perhaps, or they just
Yeah.
want to do a real good. So they just volunteer for everything. But again, then you get a bit of
Hmm.
groupthink going on. So how do we get the diversity in public engagement? That's also a problem. How do you go into a community and say, you're on the periphery of community. We want you to come to a public consultation and tell us how that is and how we can change the system. People will probably go, oh, why would I do that? What difference will I make? What
Because I think
difference
so,
will I make?
exactly. Some people feel like they fail to see how um that sort of thing would affect them individually
Yeah.
until it does, isn't it?
Until it does.
Yeah.
I mean,
Hmm.
it's like
Hmm.
the debate now we're seeing around, the reduction of the restrictions from COVID. There's people who
Hmm.
are going, I want the masks. They still don't feel safe. And the people's like, hallelujah, let's get rid of the masks. Let's celebrate. Let's do stuff. But when you look at the data, the cases are rising. There's people not dying as much, but they're hospitalized. And therefore, for people who have not experienced a death or somebody being hospitalized, for them it's like, yay, let's get rid of the mask, let's party, let's go back to normal. And then there's the other people who probably experienced it or know somebody who's died or it's impacted them, are going, hang on a minute, this is crazy. And that's why the government struggles so much. And I think that's why they've backpedaled a bit, saying, right, okay, it's not going to be a legal requirement to wear a mask. So let's just shove the
The
responsibility
mark,
on
yeah.
you. And then if it all goes wrong, it's not the government's fault. It's society, because you're not being a good citizen in making that moral decision to wear a mask when indoors with a large group of people. If you strip it back, that's kind of what it's saying. It's kind of the government's done their bit. They've done as much as they possibly can. Now it's over to you to behave in a responsible manner. Well, guess what? Don't all behave in a responsible manner, particularly after a few beers and if England are playing football or whatever. It doesn't happen.
Yeah. I think one other thing I wanted to sort of get into is you mentioned pracademic earlier, and I'm sure it's not a lot of people would know what that is. I
Yeah.
think I first came across that word as well from you, and I definitely see it as well. I mean, we've spoken about loads of things, and we're talking about industry, we're talking about emerging technology, we're talking about the education system, and I feel there are people, young people as well, who are interested in IT, who want to get into, I wouldn't say academics, but being a pracademic maybe as
Yeah.
well. What sort of opportunities are out there? Because I think, like I said, you're quite a unicorn in your own right. You don't see a lot of people in industry, sorry, in
Academia.
academia who engage as much with the industry as much. So how have you found that balance? What would be your advice to someone who's watching or listening in, and is excited about all the things you're interested in? How can they get involved? How can they sort of navigate as well within the space?
I think that there's more people like me coming to academia. So
Okay.
perhaps not as young, because I would say I was sort of mid-30s when I transitioned from industry to academia.
Yeah.
And some people come into academia when they retire early. They've made however much money that they can just retire. They don't need a big salary anymore. So they decide to give something back, which is great. I've met a lot of people like that. But they have to catch up on the true academic side. It's again, it's a funny system in that even if you are academically minded, unless you've got the piece of paper, I'm being specifically a PhD, then to be higher up in academia, you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle because the doctor title is kind of like your ticket to get in to academia. Once you've got that, then you're accepted in the system as having gone through the traumas of a PhD and come out the other side, and then you can have a legitimate say that hey, I'm a doctor, for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Then the practical side, what I did is I just decided that I would do my own thing. That I saw clearly, that I saw the benefit, that if I just do the theory, it doesn't sit well with my mind. Maybe that's from project management or always seeing collaboration as the way forward, that my mind can't possibly solve all the problems that I'm thinking about, but there'll be somebody in industry who must be, if I'm thinking about it, there must be somebody in industry who's doing it or done it or made inroads towards it at least. And that was just my feeling. I went to a lot of events that I was the only academic there, and everybody else was practitioners. So you could have 300 practitioners and there's me. But they all had varying degrees or various insights. And I was just very honest with them. I just said, I'm no better than you. I'm just here to learn. It's a learning opportunity for me. And I think that's the back to the agile mindset thing. I don't sit here because I've got 4 degrees going, woo, I've got 4 degrees. As my son will tell you, I still do stupid things. And he'll turn around at those points in my life. And I remember him being a 10-year-old and reminding me, Mom, how many degrees do you have? Is it 4? Why are you doing that? So you kept humble by your kids.
Classic.
If you ever get too big for your boots, you're kept humble by your kids. So for me,
Definitely.
they were just tools for me to learn the game of academia, and this is how it's played, and this is what I need to know. And the theory, it was great insights, but if I can't apply it to anything, I feel like it's nothing. And so if somebody wants to follow on, I would say, if you've got a degree already and you feel that there's something in academia that needs to be changed, then seek out
Mm.
somebody from their profile who looks like they're more practical. People who are saying they're working with industry, have got a track record with industry in the area that you're interested in, and then just reach out to them, see what their response is. And again, it's hard to say because it's an individual decision. I've had many students say,
Mm.
well, why did you stay in academia if you find it frustrating? Why didn't you go back into industry? I said, well, one of the reasons I
Mm-hmm.
do like it is that it gives me the freedom to think out these problems and to explore them and research them, which I would never have had the time
Mm.
had I stayed as a program manager, not in a million years.
Because it's goal. Because it's your goal. So you're goal driven in the industry. Your,
Yeah, delivering, you're
deadlines.
delivering, delivering,
Yeah,
delivering,
delivery. Yeah.
delivering.
Mm-hmm.
Academia, you do get that headspace in between teaching and everything else, but you do get some headspace just to sit, read a book, think and contextualize it. Think, how does that apply to what I'm looking at now? Do I think that's valid? Do I like it? Yeah, no, I don't like that. I've read some books and I've thought, I don't like that at all. I think it's a lot of rubbish, whatever. But other ones like Kahneman, you read it and you just, wow, okay, this guy is just making me think in a different way. And it's like students, books are a way to upload the brain. It's like uploading data to the
Mm.
brain, and then the brain can start. We're trying to mimic the brain in deep learning and machine learning and everything because it's a
Yeah.
phenomenal
Yeah.
tool. It can do a lot of connections and make synapses working to make the connections between data that we can train it. We can train it like we train our bodies to exercise. You can train your brain. So if you want to be a pracademic, that's what I would say. Have that vision that you want to make the theory and the practice come together. And for me, it's about being useful to industry as well, because like I say, I would say 95%, maybe even higher, students do not want to go into academia, particularly in a business school. They want to go into business. So therefore I try
Mm-hmm.
and balance it between like, this is the theory behind this, or I'd even get a guest speaker in like yourself and say, look, this is what Zolby's done. This is a theory of how we build it into a team. This is a theory underpinning
Mm-hmm.
why we do agile with the little a this way, because we've got to get on as a
Mm-hmm.
team. And the psychology is this. The reason you feel fear and
Mm-hmm.
threatened is because you're having an amygdala hijack, kicks in 0.2 of a
Mm-hmm.
second, and you can't do anything about it. It's just
Mm-hmm.
there. But if you recognize it, you can go, okay, I'm just panicking. It's fine. Tell my brain to
Mm-hmm.
quieten down. The emotional side of my brain is not under threat. Let's go back to being logical
Mm-hmm.
again. What can I really do here? And so if you want to get in academia, please
It's
do. Please do, because I think we need more
mm-hmm.
people who want to
Yeah.
bridge that gap between the social technical space and in
Mm-hmm.
academia. My personal belief is that is the way education is going to go. I mean, even if you look at Harvard and the Ivy Leagues across the pond, they're
Yeah.
starting to put more stuff online. They're starting to look at how, they've got Silicon Valley on their doorstep. So they can easily get in contact with what's the latest thing happening in that tech space. And I would say probably
Yeah.
Cambridge and Oxford have that because Google and all the tech giants have interacted and built around them. But there's no reason why other universities, can't have that interaction and just make it a more applied way of teaching. Yes, there might be some sections that
So.
are very theoretical, like doing research methods, and this is how you do it. But you can
Mm-hmm.
also apply it and show, right, okay, that's the theory of doing qualitative. This is a theory of doing quantitative. Here's a worked example, or
Mm-hmm.
let's go and do some surveys in town, come back, analyze it in
Mm-hmm.
the lab. Boom, there you go. And
Because yeah, because when you look at the relationship between academia and industry, I don't feel it should stop at the entry level of, sort of this particular use case of getting people into the industry. That relationship must be sustained, across the timeline. So entrance into the industry like you're doing now as well, championing projects, right? That feed into regulation, right? That feed into the strategy of the industry as a whole. Because I think, I'll be honest, when as a young person looking at academia as an option, it's not very exciting. You said it yourself. People tend to want to get into academia, when they've had their accomplishments and are looking to give back, looking to take a step back. But I think it's so relevant because without academia, in certain ways, industry wouldn't be where it is, and industry wouldn't be able to get to certain places it needs to get to. So I'm trying to sort of wrap my head around
So
that
become
relationship,
hybrid.
and I'll give,
Yeah. Our
yeah,
academic is a
yeah,
hybrid. And I think that's why we're
mm-hmm,
starting to get the courses that, like, executive MBAs. So you're already at an executive level, but what we found in research around digital ethics is that a lot of the senior C-suite, etc., don't really fully
mm-hmm,
understand the space and are frightened to say so. So you're putting on courses to educate that level as well as their mid-level and lower level entrants. And I think if we have more of these
mm-hmm,
hybrid courses that have the flexibility to fit around your working, but also deliver high quality tuition, again, that's co-created, I would say, that's starting to fill the gap. But we've still got a long way to go, Obi. I think we've still got a long way to push
mm-hmm.
academia from the purist academia to saying it needs to be a bit more agile because the world is just spinning far too fast for it to stay as rigid as it is.
Is it fair to say that while industry, because I'm sort of looking at the relationship between both, and the the relationship between both, and I look at industry sort of pushing innovation, right, and then academia sort of guiding that innovation.
Yeah.
So that could be regulation, that could be terms of strategy. What do we need to do? Where do we need to focus on? Like you said, it's very delivery based. There's a goal based sort of mentality within industry. People don't really have that time to take a step back.
No,
So
it's
that's
thinking time.
what that's
It's
yeah.
thinking time. It
Mm-hmm.
literally is. When I've done consultancy in industry, and all I do is I like get rid of everything. All I'm going to do is get you to think. Why are you doing that? Who in the company needs to be involved in that project, for instance, like mainly around organizational change. I've done some consultancy. So around the psychology of change, and literally just giving people that time to stop focusing on delivery and just sitting and thinking, what is the true purpose of this? We know the objective, we know where you want to go. Why are you having so many problems? And it sometimes can be that just people just fall into that comfy mode of, well, we'll just do the tick box. I'll just do what's on the tick
Yep.
box that I need to deliver for the sprint or whichever framework they're using. And it's like, actually, when you say to them, well, why did you do that? Well, it's on the list to tick off. Anyway, but then you want to think about it, and then when you start to get it, the more ideas come out. And I remember being one team, hang on, I thought there was like 14 of you, we only got 13. Where's the other person? Oh, he never interacts with anyone. I'm going, well, has anybody actually asked what his opinion is and why he's so disgruntled, and does he not have something to offer? So, I went and searched, got the person and talked to them separately and just said, do you feel like you're not listened to? Is that it? He went, no, yeah. They never listen to what I've got to say. Can't feel like I'm an introvert. I don't feel like I have a voice in the team. I just do what I need to do. And then I took a list from him of like all the insights that he was thinking about what they were doing on the project, took it back to the group, didn't say it was from him, and just said, look, I've got a few things I want to run past you. And put them up, and they were going, oh, they're brilliant. You came up with those brilliant ideas. I said, no, I didn't come up with them. Your teammate did. and it's just something simple as that, because it's a human trait. We just sometimes get that tunnel vision of what we want to do, and it's really hard to step back and go, is this really the right way to go? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Because there's always improvements that can be made. But then again, it doesn't have to be group think that every new idea is great either. You have to sit back and evaluate it and make sure it fits with what you're trying to do. So it's all about balance. But being a pro-academic is not easy, I would say, because I probably sacrifice maybe a paper a year or more, maybe one or two, by engaging with industry to get the papers later. So you've got to sacrifice and make that like CRM, customer relationship management, to get that network
Mm-hmm.
going and industry wanting to work with you, because there's still that barrier between the go, oh well, what can an academic do for me, and there's that barrier there. I was like, oh, I know what industry can do for me, but sometimes I go, what can you do for us? What are you going to talk about?
Exactly. Yeah.
And you've always got
So,
this gap between time to
mhm.
market and the academic taking the time to think, and you've got to
Yeah,
work around this time to
the
market
balance.
academic
Mm-hmm.
coming along with the slow kind of thinking, rationally slower, where you've got hot thinking, as that Kahneman would say, hot thinking, need to get it to market.
But would would you say that, taking too much time as an academic is less agile?
Yeah,
So now this is the balance.
it's like everything in life.
How do you balance? Yeah.
In
Mm-hmm.
balance, you've got to. I mean, sometimes like everybody in business, you're balancing students, marketing, teaching, development, papers, funding bids, um, everything else. So that there are papers that they take too long to write, because you're picking them up and putting them down in between other projects or teaching or PhD students. So the papers, in essence, sometimes when they're published, they might have been 4 years in the writing and publishing phase, and
Mm.
therefore they're out of date almost when they're published, which is strange. But on the other hand, you can get very quick papers, like when I did this year, I wrote it in 4 weeks, published 2 weeks later. It just depends on the constraints of the paper and what you need to address. If you need to
Yeah.
do a lot of data
Yeah.
collection, a lot of data
Mm-hmm.
analysis, it can take you like a
Mm.
year to collect the data, another 6 months to a year in between all your other duties to do it. If you're working collaboratively, you've got co-authors and things. So it
Yeah. So
you try to balance it as
this
best you
this
can.
apprent yeah, this apprenticeship that you
Mhm.
mentioned that Newcastle University is doing, can you, what is it about? Because I'm thinking this is one of those opportunities that younger people can sort of use to get into
Yeah.
academia.
So
Um,
it's a
yeah,
different way of doing
can you
it.
talk more about that, please?
Yeah, it's a different way of doing
Mm-hmm.
it. So we've got the Institute of Coding as part of the School of Computing, and what they've done is, it just started running last year, was open this apprenticeship scheme, which, like I said, is for companies to sponsor a young person who hasn't got a degree to have the benefit of academic
Mm-hmm.
training over 2 years. So eventually they come out with a degree or a master's if they've already got a degree, and that training. So again, it's like they're working in the job, but they're also, it's almost like day release, like it used to be at college. You get time in the university, time to go apply it in your job. At the end of the day, you then can get promoted, hopefully, in the company when you go back. But you haven't had the cost of a degree, because the company's funded you and supported you. But also, what probably happens on the company side is they'll put something in your contract that if you do the apprenticeship, you have to stay with the company for so many years to pay them back for that investment. That's
Yeah,
what I would
yeah,
imagine
yeah.
would happen in contracts, because you could also envisage that somebody goes, right, okay, I'll go and do an apprenticeship. Right now, I'm going to go and work for Google. So that the companies have also got to protect themselves against that risk of sponsoring somebody through
Yeah.
an apprenticeship and not letting them not put that value back in their company as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
but it's a good scheme.
Yeah. 100%.
It's that compromise between, but again, it depends if the company has sufficient funds to sponsor a person to be trained. But it's a good way not to be burdened with the debt of a degree either, paying the fees and having student loans, etc.
I think for anyone listening, I think from all we've discussed, if you sort of have experience in the industry and maybe you like to think through things a bit more with more moving parts, like to strategize about the industry
Mm-hmm.
in a more critical way, then probably consider academia in
as
IT as
well,
well as an option, isn't it?
or reach out to an academic to form part of a project team with you, because we work with various companies where we're part of their projects, and again we work at a slower pace because we're doing the thinking, the investigating, the data analysis,
Yeah, yeah,
collection.
yeah.
So it's almost like an extra resource. And like you say, if you have got a penchant as a young person who you're interested in industry, but you also want to go deeper into the thinking side, then academia
Yeah,
would be
yeah,
a good choice for
yeah,
you. I mean, there are career
yeah.
academics who've never worked in industry and just do academia, but I also think there's a bit of blinkering in that route as well. I think if you take time out
Yeah.
in the real world, for want of a better word, and understand how what you're studying works, even if it's just a secondment, you can do that now. You can have a secondment to a company to understand more how it works, how the theory is applied, then I think that's also beneficial.
In terms of validation in academia, I think it's something I've heard you mention. You kind of have to sacrifice. I think I heard you speak about this on the Mana podcast, if I'm not mistaken.
Probably.
So I think one of the things you touched on was, sometimes you have to, while you're engaging in the industry, it takes a lot of your time, it takes a lot of capacity. But
Yes.
then as well, if you want to be recognized in academia, you have to write papers as such. So how do you balance sort of working with industry and having to fulfill the requirements of academia, which, obviously probably needs some
Yeah.
rejuvenation and
It
reconsideration?
does, yeah. I mean, the paper writing is never straightforward or easy. It's time consuming because again, you've got to think, you've got to couch in a certain area, you've got to get accepted it to a journal. So the way I balance it is that I aim to write, 3 or 4 papers a year because, like I say, in between teaching, it might not always come off. But I also look for
Yeah.
funding as well, which is a way to trade off. So where I might not have got as many papers as another colleague, but I've got significantly more funding because I've built up those networks with industry. The paper is like
Right,
deferred
right.
gratification. So if you think it like doing a degree is almost that principle of deferred gratification. While you're doing an undergrad for 3 years, you won't be earning what somebody would working in a tech company. But the principle is that when you finish that, then if you do an internship in between or you learn to practically apply, you could in theory get more than the person in the company eventually after 2 or 3 years. It might not be first, but it's that principle of deferred gratification. Okay, I'm not going to get a big salary while I'm studying, but the potential to earn more will come, say, 5 years afterwards. And I think it's the same with
So,
building up an industry relationship as an academic. You put in that time, put myself out, go to events, London, here, there, everywhere. But then the benefits, it's almost like a project. When you immediately finish a project, the benefits don't come immediately, do they? They come gradually. You don't immediately realize the benefits from a project once it's implemented. It's over a period of time you get it. It's the same thing. You can't build a relationship with an industry partner overnight. You've got to have repeated interaction, and that necessarily eats into my capacity to do papers. But as long as I'm pumping out 1 or 2 papers a year, then I'm okay. Because like I say, they can take 2 or 3 years.
papers and funding, yeah.
Yeah, but if I've
Yeah.
got funding, which I have,
Papers.
then I can offset the argument like, well, you're not producing
Yeah.
enough papers. But I also write blogs. I've also done magazine articles, and then people are like, oh, well, it's not an academic paper. I say, yeah, but it's getting people interested in what we're doing in academia, and it's showing.
And that would.
Yeah, it hopefully increases
So
engagement.
the reason I ask is just so for anyone listening to understand the industry, the academic industry, a bit better and what they're sort of getting into.
Yeah. If
I
you don't
think
like writing,
I
don't
think
be an
something.
academic.
Yeah, fair. You've heard it here, man. If Karen is saying that, I'll take over for it. So one thing I also wanted to touch on. I think we've already been speaking about this in different ways. It's agile. Um, can you sort of if I were to describe agile, right, in the most basic sense of it, and like you mentioned earlier, it's more of a mindset. It's more, to me, agile is figuring out the most effective and efficient way to get something done with good value, and it's as simple as that,
Yeah.
right? And that's the high level, and collaboration feeds into the efficiency and it being effective. That's my own sort of attempt at that. What do you think agile is from your experience? Just to break it down in layman's terms without, any of the technical parts of it. But what is agile? What's that agile mindset? How would you instill it in
Okay.
someone else?
Having been someone who started out life in the more rigid project management framework, okay,
Yeah.
where you just had a list of tasks to do, and once you completed
Yeah.
those tasks, that was great. Like you say, the movement to agility was to recognize the people. So you have user stories and you build, or personas, you build a solution around a living, breathing thing. Whereas in the more traditional style of project management, it was just, you were just producing a product. You didn't think about the person using the product at the end of it. You had product descriptions and tasks. So what Agile has done is put it back around, this is a person that's going to use the end of it. And this is how it emerged, where you've got all these developers going, we don't really like that rigid format because we're actually building stuff for people to use, and we think it's quite cool. We get
As a life. Yeah.
we get people's stories, and there's all sorts of different stories. So then we can think about how to build it. So what we do is we go to them, we go, look, you told us this. We've built that. Ta-da. What do you think? Well, it could still do this and this. Okay, we'll go back. So you go back and you tweak with it a bit more, and they go, ta-da, it can do this. Great, fine. Then they use it for a bit and go, it would be great if it could just do a bit more of that. So what do? You issue an upgrade. You just upgrade it like we do with all our phones. But it's basically more of a narrative based, which humans work on, right? We have history of passing stories down, sayings in our lives like ring a roses, pocket full of posits comes from a flu epidemic. A tissue, we all fall down. So it's like built on our history is delivered to people through narratives. And I think Agile embodies that. It's around a use case or a user story, and you build a solution for that. And then you iteratively develop it because, as we know, nothing stands still. What's true today is not true tomorrow. So, the day before COVID hit and the day after COVID hit, two entirely different situations.
Completely different stories.
You need to adapt. And that's the ability 100%. Of it. It can quickly adapt, whereas the old systems used to be A has to be completed first, then we do B. We can't go back to A. No, we have to go A, B, C, D, and then go da-da, and they go, it's not fit for purpose. Whereas Agile, you can go backwards and forwards based on the feedback and iteratively tweak it until you're reasonably happy with it. And then that's the sort of framework, but wrapped around that is this growth mindset, not like credit scoring, where this is how it's always been done, so this is how the system goes. It's like, no, that system's not working. So what can we learn to make that system fit in with what we're trying to build? And it's like these oscillating adaptive systems, like, oh, there's a problem here, right? Okay, so they told us this on this use case, but that person's telling us this. Let's look at these, and how do we get a consensus of it working there? And then, something's happening in the system over here. Let's look at credit scoring. How do they judge whether person's got a credit score? Wow, that seems a bit crazy. They're judging them on the last 3 years. They could lose their job tomorrow. What are they spending now? What is the likelihood of them spending that next week and the next month based on what they're spending today, not 3 years ago? And this is where people have got, it's more like a learning, open growth mindset rather than back to Einstein's, if you always do what you've always done, why would you expect a different outcome? It's about pushing around things, and Einstein's got some lovely quotes, like if we're trying to measure intelligence, do we say a fish isn't intelligent because it can't climb a tree? These sort of things, it's it makes you think about how we categorize.
It's all about perspective,
how we categorize as humans, and do we leave that category as fixed, or do we leave it so it has agility based on the feedback loop that you're getting from people who use it and say, it'd be great if you could just do this. And that's the difference. It's more like you've got a fixed mindset that used to pervade in project management. Like, this is how project management is done. You follow PMI or you follow Prince 2 or a slight version of that. And that's how you do it to be a good project manager. Now you flipped more the agile space. It's like, well, we still need a bit of a structure as to how we get from A to B, but it's more based on narrative stories that actually solve the problems rather than what we think is the problem, and we don't interact until we've produced the solution. Now, in between producing the solution, we're going backwards and forth, which is a natural thing for a human to do. You think when we make a decision, oh, was that the right decision? Should I just go back and check? Oh, yeah, I did lock the door and pick up the door keys before I left the house. Right.
Yeah.
I've checked. Do I need to check again? Yeah, I just need to check this. Did I shut the kitchen window or did I not? Right, I'll go back. And then it's all feedback loops to get to the outcome, right?
Yeah. I think one thing I'm really happy that you brought up there was structure, because sometimes in industry now, it it could be, it's very easy for someone just trying to understand the concept of agile to feel like agile is just
Structureless.
chaos.
It's not.
Exactly. It's not the case, and it's more about giving yourself that flexibility to change, adapting to change, having you have a structure, but you don't put unnecessary constraints, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know,
it's not fixed. It's malleable.
It's not fixed.
You can play about
Yes,
with it.
very much so.
It's a bit like Rubik's
Very,
Cube.
very
Learn all
much
the different combinations until you think you've got all the same colors lined up.
So there's still a lot of conventional sort of techniques within agile that are used, and I feel when I look at it, it depends on the type of project, the type of industry. Some sort of applications for technology or hardware, you can't even afford to make mistakes, right? So I feel like you need to be a bit more conventional in your approach. So when I think of agile is not void of conventional sort of traditional techniques. It's an embodiment of it, right? It's an extension of that. It's like,
it depends, like you say, it depends what you're trying to build. Because if you're trying to build a house,
exactly,
you can't do it in an agile way. There is you have to do the foundation first. You can't build the roof first and then go back to the foundations. You just can't do it. There's a structure.
Yeah.
You know, if you're building a car, you have to have a spec plan build approach of the traditional. Then you've got the hybrid model of an electric car. So you spec plan build the car frame, but all the tech that goes inside a Tesla, you can do in an agile installation way. And then you could maybe have pure agile frameworks if it's more towards the pure digital application. And this is it's one of the first slides I put up for students. And like, what is your project? Is it traditional? Is it a hybrid? Or is it purely agile that you're trying to reach to? And then we
and it's a spectrum.
Yeah, it's a spectrum.
Yes, it's a spectrum, isn't it? And you just need to find the sweet spot depending on your project, the kind of people you work, your customer base, all of that.
Yeah. It's the same with your mindset. You'll get up some days and you'll just go, no. You'll argue black as white that this is how it is, because in that particular day, you've got a fixed mind outlook and you don't want to change. You don't want to hear about it. You just know that is how I think today. Other days, you're like, oh, yeah, I'll read this bit. I'll look at that bit on YouTube. What do I think of that? Yeah, that'll make me do this. And then some days you're in total, I don't know what to do. And this 100%. Helps you. When you're in the don't know what to do phase, that's when humans like a little bit of structure to go, what do I need to do at this stage? If I look back at the framework of agile, yes, that's where I am. I'm there, and that kind of reduces you and gets you back on a plan. If you had no structure whatsoever, it would just be like kids playing sand, wouldn't it?
Chaos.
Just
it'll be
throw it
chaos,
around the chaotic system, and you don't want that.
You don't want that. I think I'm happy. Another thing I wanted to speak about is, as a woman in the IT industry, it's an industry that's well documented to not be as diverse as it should. Now, specifically from your perspective as a woman, what do you see in the industry? Do you feel it's getting better? I know
It
probably
is.
coming
Mm.
up, especially in your situation, you probably didn't see a lot of mentors or examples, you know, to look up to sort of,
No, I think that's why I forged my own
motivate
way.
you
But
in your career.
that's
Yeah.
kind of been borne out by my background. I guess I was always
Mm,
independently minded as a kid. So, I'd take in what people would say, and I'd just do my own thing. Maybe because my mother was quite ill when I was young, so I just had to do stuff for myself. So it's always been in my head, well,
mm,
nobody's going to do it for you, so you're just going to have to find a way, a solution. And I always say to people, there's always solutions, there's always ways around things to try and get to where you want to be, to try and work. Do I say that we're all successful? No. Do I think that failure is bad? No. I
mm.
think that failure is a learning opportunity. I've had many students come to me, and they're really upset they failed an assignment. And I'm going, actually, you haven't failed. You either, you don't lose. You either win or you learn. And this is a learning opportunity.
You win or you
Go
learn.
back.
Yeah, I love
It's
that. Yeah.
Mandela's
Mm-hmm.
saying, which is lovely. I've got a picture of his
Mm-hmm.
great face, and it just says, I never lose. I win or I learn. And it's like my mantra, even when I'm maybe having a bad day, I think, no, it's not so bad. It's just I have to learn that this didn't work on this
Yeah.
particular day, and I need to get around it.
100%. Yeah.
So it's about this. There's another good book out by what do you call Karen Smith? I'll send it to you, called Grit. And it's a woman, one of the first women
Okay,
who
please
made it
do.
to the top
Yeah.
level in the US Army, I think it is, or Navy. And she talks
Mm,
about developing grit and resilience. And I think you do. I think you have to sort of understand your own strengths and weaknesses and build around
mm,
them, and then work with people who can help you with your weaknesses. Um,
mm-hmm.
it's different things. I mean, different
So,
stages of my life, I've learned
mhm,
different things about my own personality. Does it stay static? No, it's changed, it's developed, it's morphed, it's mellowed a bit. I was probably a bit headstrong in my 20s, a bit too vocal.
mm.
Still direct.
you
I'm still
you
direct.
learned.
That's always
Yeah,
part of my
yeah, yeah,
personality. I'll
yeah.
stand my ground if I find
Mm,
I can't stand injustice. If I think it's not just what
mm,
someone's done, then I'll verbalize it. Um, but
mm,
yeah, I think you can learn from other examples, and you just don't fail. Fail is an opportunity to learn. And we've all, I've
What?
failed exams. Everybody's failed something
Mm-hmm.
at some point, and then you go, okay, right, what did I do wrong?
Mm,
Okay, in the resit or whatever, I'll retake it. But it's not the end of the world. I think it was it's like cyclists. Fortunately, I think Lance Armstrong
mm,
said that's like the pain only lasts for a second and molecules, and then something else will come in to replace it. So it's like mindset to
mm.
sort of get over the bitter pain of failure or
Yeah,
whatever's happened in your life that you perceive to have failed, and then
yeah.
repackage it in your head. Again, it's the agility to repack it and not be fixed and focused on, well,
Mm,
everything bad happens to me. It's always bad that happens to me. It's like, no, it's just you've been in
mm,
that circumstance where something bad has happened, but what did you learn from it? And how can you avoid that happening again? And
mm. So, yeah. So, what would you say are the major challenges that you faced,
oh, as a
and
woman, um,
as a woman in the industry, if you could give some examples, it could be little things, but
I think,
and how have you
yeah,
overcome them as
I
well?
think things are better. I remember,
Mm-hmm.
in the sort of late 80s when I joined industry, major misogyny and sexism about your appearance,
I can imagine.
what you were
Yeah.
wearing, very inappropriate comments that I remember being 16 or
Mm-hmm.
17 and working in office and just
Mm-hmm.
thinking, oh my God, what is that all about? Which is totally unacceptable now. I think
Mm-hmm.
there's still a bit of misogyny still just simmering under the surface. I think there's been a lot of women who are
Mm-hmm.
breaking that taboo, breaking the barrier, but it's still there. It's still in the
Mm,
culture. And I've had it where I know people have taken my ideas and passed them off as their own. I'm going, that was my idea. Oh, no, you couldn't have come up with that. you know, and or
Mm.
you give your opinion and then they just move straight on, and the male's opinion, which almost mirrors what you're saying, you're sitting there and going, well, that's
I just said that.
I just said that, and no, I've even said that.
Yeah.
So that's just what I've said. You just tweaked it slightly. No, that's my. I'm like,
Yeah.
so you still get it, and moving into
Mm-hmm.
academia. You know, once I got my first position, I moved very quickly up to the next level because I just worked hard and pushed.
Mm.
And it's almost like you're lucky. What did you do to get that position, which has influences to it? And then, you know, oh, that's happened really quick for you. That shouldn't have happened that quickly for you. I'm like, why shouldn't it? Well, I'm like, well, because I'm a woman,
Mm.
and it's
Mm.
and I've been told, you know, you're too confident, you're too outspoken. You should learn when not to be so direct. And I went, would you be saying that to me if I was? No,
Mm.
I'd be patted on the back for being
Man.
assertive and saying what I meant to do and doing it. And
Mm.
yeah, you still get it. Is it as much? No, but there are pockets of it.
Mm.
I mean, you just got to look at the makeup of our boards of our real top level institutions.
Mm.
How many females still lead? Not it's better, but it's I
Mm.
always have that skeptical bit that thinks, is it tokenism or is it genuine? Are they meeting the
Mm.
quotas because they have to?
Ah.
Are
Yeah.
they,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and also you have this other
Yeah.
debate that it has to be the best person for the role. And if you're just putting a female in there because it ticks that box, I also don't agree with that either. So it's a
Mm.
difficult one to balance. But is there inherent sexism in the UK? Yes. it's still
Mm.
there. It is being addressed. It's
Mm.
getting better. I think there's a lot of women grouping together to get that group impetus. But it's like in the fintech sector. I think it was Innovate Finance did some research on VC investment in new startups, and for women, 11%,
Mm-hmm.
11% got backed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a
Mm.
huge difference. And why? Because when you look at
Mm.
the research around entrepreneurship, it's the perception that women are more risk averse, but their companies tend to last because they're more
Agreeable, isn't it?
strategic
Mm-hmm.
and cautious in their
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
thinking. And you could argue that goes
Mm.
to the nature nurture, that we will nurture something rather than go and fail. We'd rather just look at the
Mm.
risks, calculate the risk, and yes, it'll grow, but it won't grow as quickly. And that's what research bears
Mm.
out. So therefore, the VCs want a return on their investment quicker, so they might go for that one, but they also risk failure of the company. So
Yeah.
I think we are moving in the right direction. It's a heck of a lot better than it was in the late 80s and 90s and early noughties.
Yeah.
It's much better. And there
Yeah.
are a lot more role models that people can look up to and see breaking tradition and
Yeah.
forward. But I think that there's still a lot to be done. We've still only had like
I think
1.5 female prime ministers because Theresa May only kind of got like a half term in office.
yeah. I think the group thing, like you mentioned, having mentors, having people like you know, to look up to definitely changes the game. You, like you said, you're very strong willed. Some people need to see that, you know, I need to see an image of me doing that, you know, for me to, you know, get myself going. And it's the groups as well, different sort of organizations, different sort of communities
Mm-hmm.
for women to come together to discuss these things, because like you said, a lot of these things are inherent in the industry, right?
Yeah.
They're going to be there, you're going to have to deal with them, but it's, I feel like awareness is key.
Mm-hmm.
Awareness is key, so you know how to go about it and you know how to deal with it, and in time, like you said, it's progressed since the 80s, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it's massively
And it would
progressed.
only
Massively
continue
progressed.
to get better. Yeah,
And we need
yeah,
to
definitely.
recognize that and build on it. Like I've met many great
Exactly.
women in finance, like Charlotte Croswell, just recently got OBE. There's Ruth Harrison, who leads like a women in leadership group for ThoughtWorks. And I take part in that.
Yeah.
And it's like women in industry who've pushed the boundaries. sort of Inga in Barclays, etc., making sure it was more diverse and being like the first person to break through that barrier and challenge the very dominant male behavior around finance, etc. And it's just great when you go in that series, you go, wow, these women have done all these different things, and we've got to keep that momentum going to level it up a bit.
Definitely. Yeah. Another thing I wanted to speak on the mental aspect of, sort of being in the industry, especially for my position, say as a product manager, product owner, dealing with a lot of uncertainty. Because that's what, we tend to do. We tend to at the idea stage where you could basically go any direction. You need to find the direction to go and know why you're going in that direction. But in the IT industry in general, there's a lot of self-sabotage. I think there's a lot of there's the feeling of the imposter syndrome as well. And I think that also feeds into the lack of diversity for women in the industry as well. So a woman being in the room, for example, um, might feel, am I going to get caught up? As a black young man myself as well, sometimes that imposter syndrome feeds in from that as well in certain sort of situations. And I feel everyone goes through that, the imposter syndrome, the
I've
self-sabotage.
been through it. I would defy anybody who hasn't at some point in their life gone, oh,
Yeah.
I don't know whether I should really, is it really me who should be here right now? I think if they're
So
honest,
with your 4 degrees, you still feel sometimes
still
that you shouldn't be in the
sometimes,
room.
you're
That's
like
interesting.
you meet
Yeah.
people who've done things and you think, wow, what did I do with my life? Well, they were doing all this stuff. So you do feel it, or you just think, is this really what I can speak to? As I think everybody has a touch of it, because that's what makes us human. We can't profess to be 100% confident all the time, if we're honest. I mean, there'll be some people who blag it, but I don't believe them as a psychologist. I think everybody has their insecurities, and they come out at different times, different contexts, and sometimes they catch you unawares. You just get that feeling of like, oh, am I at my death here? So
what's your key to overcoming that? What's your major strategy? And I'll tell you mine after you tell me yours.
My elixir to kind of balance everything has been exercise. Always exercise, because I can just throw myself into what's the next shot I'm hitting in tennis. If I'm cycling, okay, what's my cadence rate, where the next corner's coming up. I can just lose myself in that and blank out. Or I say specifically on a horse, a good gallop on a horse just obliterates stress. You can sit on top of a horse, look across the valley, and just go back to nature. I like going back to
I need to
nature.
try that myself.
Yeah, going back to nature and just forgetting the digital and everything, and just thinking, this is where I need to be. And that's how I tend to cope. And I also, if I find myself getting really stressed, then I think, okay, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed with what I've taken on. Have I taken on too much? Possibly. Right. Now I need to just be honest and prioritize and cut some things out in order to deliver here, and here. I think it's probably one of my weaknesses that I'll go, yeah, I'll do this, and then I'll think, oh, wow, that's probably a little
bit too much.
Let's be a little bit honest with what you can realistically achieve, and then go back and say to people, right, okay, realistically, I need this and this, and learning from being maybe like my 20s and wanting to do everything to where I am now is like saying no happens. No, I can't do that. Even though I'd like to do it, I can't do it if I want a life outside of working. And I think getting that balance, particularly, I think lots of people have felt it, particularly in lockdown, like in education. We've just worked throughout, the schools have worked throughout, the medics have done a wonderful job. And trying to balance that and trying to de-stress, you have to try and find a little bit of time off, and just go back to what relaxes you, and being in nature and exercising are my key things. And if I can't do that, then I just kind of sit and go, how bad is it really? Okay, now you need to prioritize, and
Mm,
you need to say,
mm,
sorry, I'm just whacked, or I'm overwhelmed, or this is just not going to happen when I
yeah.
think it's going to happen. And that's just
Mm,
human. There's things that happen. You plan stuff, something
yeah.
else happens, and you can't, illness or somebody ill that you care for, etc. It happens.
I think, yeah, I think for me, when I used to feel that, a lot of I got a lot of relief from finding out that a lot of people who are way ahead of their careers than I was, who were much more accomplished, were facing and having the same feelings of, the imposter syndrome as well. So that's kind of one thing I really want to highlight on the podcast as well, that
It's
everyone goes through
common.
it, because I feel, yeah, so when, as a young person, if you acknowledge that, even your manager might be feeling this, even the CTO of the company, even your director might be feeling this, it sort of puts you at ease and just makes you feel less, sort of
Yeah.
makes you feel more calm. And the second thing for me is just trust and confidence as well. You do have to put in the hard work when you're faced with a challenge,
Hmm.
100%. But it's just sort of trusting yourself to figure it out,
Yeah.
and that, I think, that kind of comes with being in that position a couple of times and like surviving. So it's like the first time you do it, so I could do this, then there's that reinforcement that you do get into the situations and you are able to figure it out. And I feel
Yeah.
that's so critical for anyone,
And
yeah, because there's a lot of things happening in yeah, go on.
life events happen, and then hindsight, they always say hindsight
Mm-hmm.
is a wonderful thing, but then if I look back at my life and think about the different challenges that I've had and how I've dealt with them
Hmm.
and overcome them, and where I am now, and you look back and you go, I wasn't so bad, was it? But at the time it can feel like everything's exploding and nothing's working, and
Yeah.
everything can go wrong, but you
Mm.
you kind of think, right, okay. I think one of my big things to my self chat was, you can do this, and like, no one else is going to do it for you, so just get on with it.
Mm.
And yeah, it sounds,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's easy for you to say, but that was said multiple times to myself, not just once, and it was over. It was like a progression of, like, we can still do this, there's still a
It's
solution,
constant, it never goes
have a
away,
step back,
yeah.
okay, there's
Yeah.
still a way around this, oh, that didn't work, right, okay, rethink, what did you do there, right, okay, what do you need to do to get over there, right, okay. And there's all sorts of things, it's like, I broke
it's
my
the
knee playing
it's the
tennis.
agile.
Yeah, I broke my knee playing tennis a
Mm,
couple of years ago, and I was like thinking, I don't know if I'll be able to play tennis again. And now I'm back playing tennis, and
mm.
my legs strengthened up again, and it's all fixed. And I had a complex tear of the meniscus as well. And it was just, and people were like, oh, you're so sporty. How are you coping, Brian? You can't go to the gym. You can't do this. You can't do that. You've got a big pot on your leg. Now you've got a big brace on your leg. And I was hopping around lecturing. And I
Yeah.
a bit naughty, because I remember one day I like hopped in on my lecture, new set of students, and that my kind of mischievous side just pretended to fall on the crutches,
Mm.
and then I caught myself and, and I went, hi, welcome to my class. I was like, it's going to have fun elements, and it was just an icebreaker, and everybody started laughing because it was all international. I was
Definitely,
going,
yeah.
yep, you can just call me
Yeah.
RoboCop leg lecturer. Okay, let's just get out of the way. It looks like a RoboCop. Let's go. And humor is a good thing as well for breaking
Yeah.
awkward situations, or when you um,
Mm-hmm.
have a language barrier, even you can, or sport. I mean, sport
Mm-hmm.
is a
Mm-hmm.
great level of football, anything, tennis,
Yeah.
cricket, whatever if you start to wrap it in a sports analogy, most people respond to it. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
like life brings imposter syndrome incidents every now and again. You get thrown a
Mm-hmm.
new bit of information coming out, and I don't know about that. What do I need to know? And then you're asked a
Mm-hmm.
question on it, and you're like, wow. But also being able to admit that you don't know, and saying, I don't know, but I can go and
Yes.
find out,
Yeah.
and I can come back to you. Because a lot of people
Yeah.
will try
It's
and
it's
skirt, oh
yeah.
yeah, I know that. So what is it? I know that. And then I get, oh, okay. Yeah.
I feel like maturity, people who maturity in a career or in a field, being an expert, doesn't necessarily come from knowing everything, but it's sort of being able to deal with the calm of not knowing everything
Mhm.
in a weird way. So
Nobody can
yeah,
know
definitely.
everything.
I think
Yeah.
yeah. No way. I think that's a great note to sort of end things, to get people thinking about that mental aspect of the industry. And I'm really happy. I'm really happy for you coming on. I'm really happy for
Mm.
you taking the time.
Just to finish
And
on
I
the
think
mindset, just one quick one.
yeah.
Carol Dweck,
Okay.
who wrote
Sorry. Go on. No, go on.
Professor Carol Dweck, she's on YouTube, she's brilliant, talks about the growth or agile mindset. And she was saying about that, she was saying there are no naturally gifted people. They just work harder than most. And if you think about that in the sports context, or Einstein, they just worked and worked and worked to get where they are. And then you think like Michael
Yeah.
Jordan, basketball player, he was up 2 hours before college practicing so he could get on the team.
Yeah, definitely.
Cyclists, runners, horse riders, they're up and they're working at it
Yeah.
constantly to make those incremental improvements above and beyond the rest of us. And that's where they are. Tennis players start when they're 3 and get to be brilliant on up.
It's not. It's yeah. Everything sort of takes. You need to put in the time, and it
You
will
need
pay
the hard
dividends, isn't
work.
it?
Nothing
It
is given
rolls
to
up.
you.
It rolls up. It
Yeah.
rolls up.
You do
Yeah,
get a bit of
100%.
serendipity with the people that you meet. You know, it is true in networks. It's not what you know. Sometimes it's who you know and who can make
It's
the
who you
connection.
know.
So networking is good, but also the
100%.
hard work
Yeah.
to make those connections, to put yourself in the place where you can make a
Oh
network
yes.
is also hard work. Like you say,
100%.
sacrificing, trading off something, an academic paper for spending time at a practitioner event, then gets you known in that circle. Oh, who was that academic who was here? Oh, yeah, it was Karen. Was she at Newcastle? All right, I'll get in contact with her. You know, so it's that sort of thing.
100%. Yeah. I want to sort of ask a question, and just on a final note. So you've come your sort of background in the IT industry is project management, but obviously with this whole agile movement in the industry where companies are being restructured, roles are being revised, where we see project managers going towards in the let's say in the Scrum framework is a Scrum Master. So for the benefit of anyone listening, any young person listening, and that's really trying to understand the essence of what being a Scrum Master is about, could you, in your own sort of few words, describe the role of a Scrum Master?
He's the ultimate. He or she is the ultimate team player. So you have it comes from the analogy of rugby. I mean, that's
I
the
like
place.
that.
So if you think about the rugby team and they form a scrum and it's collectively stronger together. If you break down the individual scrum it's like complexity. It's more than the sum of its parts. So the scrum master brings the sum of the parts together to work as a collective. So the scrum master in essence is like the facilitator and coordinator to exchange the ideas, makes it work through the team, does a little bit of firefighting if there's a problem, sorts it out, speaks to the product owner like yourself if you need a bit more support and resource. But the Scrum Master, in essence, is doing the interesting, flexible, creative bit, working with the team. And they're just the ultimate coordinator to make it work. Can't do it on an individual level.
Wow.
And that's the challenge, and it's exciting because people you've got the storming, norming, forming, performing of that team, getting it together, making it work, ironing out the conflicts, because humans are good at conflict as well. So ironing out the conflict, actually getting it to perform is a key in itself. And that's what Scrum Masters do. And then they kick up to your level and then go and annoy you when they've got problems.
No, I love that. The ultimate team player, looking out for everyone and making sure the team performs as a team.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's it. I love that. Thanks a lot, Karen. But hopefully you can come on some other time and we speak about other things. But this, I've really enjoyed this. Thanks for coming on, Karen. Have a good rest of your week.
You too.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Take care.